Daf Tetvav Amud Aleph and Amud Bet. When the Torah law seems absurd, Shor Haniskal beKaf Gimel. A Shor Haniskal is of 23 judges. It's just too beautiful how every morning we have an opportunity to unravel some of the mysteries of the Torah. And sometimes it's not just the mysteries of the Torah, but it's the secrets of the world that we can uncover in these few minutes that we spend together unpacking things that emerge in the Gemara as we go through the Gemara page by page. Today we have the din of the Shor Haniskal. That's a case where an ox has to be stoned. We have the posuk in Parshas Mishpatim, v'chiyigach shor et ish or et isha v'amet. If an ox gores a person and the person dies as a result of the goring, sakol yisakel ashor, the ox has to be killed. If the ox is an ox that has previously gored, he's a mu'ad, that he's known to be a goring ox, v'lo yishmerenu, and the owner doesn't take good care of this ox, and as a result of that he kills a person, the ox kills a person, hashor yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat. The ox will be stoned and the person himself will be put to death. And of course we know that doesn't mean that the owner is put to death. There's kofar has to apply, there's a payment involved and so on, but the Gemara deals with that posuk. And the Gemara says, based on the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says, Shor Haniskal be'esrim v'shalosh, when a decision has to be made about putting an ox to death, it requires esrim v'shlosha dayanim, it requires 23 judges. One of those Batei Din, the same level of Beit Din needed to put a human being to death for murder. Why? Because it says, Ashor Yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat. In one phrase it says the ox has to be stoned and a man also shall be put to death, meaning just as when kemitat ha'ba'alim kach mitat ashor, just as when a Beis Din has to decide a matter of capital punishment for a human, it has to be a Beis Din of 23. So when a Beis Din has to decide a matter of capital punishment for an ox, it has to be 23. Abaye says Tirova, how do we know? Maybe it means that you've really got to put the person to death. That's how far the Gemara is willing to consider, and it takes half an Amud to go into the whole question of maybe it actually means that it's a capital offense for the owner of the ox. We know how difficult it is to put a person to death for proper murder. That there's even a thought that maybe a person has to be put to death because his ox killed a human being. It sounds very, very far-fetched. And the Gemara goes on and eventually comes to the conclusion. No, it says in the Pasuk that a person is put to death, mot yumat hamaker rotzeachu, a person is put to death because he is a murderer. Only when he is a murderer, not when his ox has killed somebody that isn't to death. That's how the Gemara finally comes to the conclusion that it couldn't possibly mean that the human being is also put to death. That's not feasible. And the Rishonim, Tosfos and the other Rishonim go into the whole question of how do you learn this and how could you learn this and what is the Gemara thinking, and the other Rishonim and the Achronim all talk about that. But there's an underlying principle that nobody seems to address, and it's just absurd. It's just totally absurd. There's such a thing as a gzeras hakosov. There are chukim, there are laws of the Torah that are beyond us. We don't understand them. But that doesn't mean that they're absurd. You don't understand the laws, shatnez. You can't wear linen and wool together in the same garment. Why not? Who knows why not? So you can say it's a chok, you can attempt to give reasons, but it's not absurd. It's just, we don't understand it. But come on, you hear that a Beis Din of 23 people is gathering in the town. Ooh, now all the press is out. 23 judges. That means it's a capital. There's been a murder. What's the case? Yes, there's a murder. Didn't you hear that Yankel died? Yeah, but Yankel died on Freddie's farm. It was Oli the ox who killed Yankel. It wasn't a human. Yeah, well, it's Oli the ox who's the accused. He's up in Beis Din. Really, 23 dayonim are sitting around in a court of law discussing whether Oli the ox should be put to death or not. And we're killing oxen every day for meat. We don't have a Beis Din to decide, can this ox be killed? Can that ox be? We kill them. And now, all of a sudden, 23 dayonim sitting to discuss whether Oli the ox gets killed. So I couldn't go any further in the Gemara. I couldn't sleep last night because I just couldn't find a way of understanding. What is this? It's just beyond understanding. And of course, when we discover something that seems absurd, we know we're getting to something very deep and very, very important. Because the laws of the Torah are much more than behavioral or societal laws. That's where the Torah is so different from any other legal system. This isn't a set of behavioral norms. As we've said before, those norms we would have to do, the same as a mitzvah, one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Every society in the world is required by the Torah to make societal laws. So we also would have made societal laws. You don't need a Torah for that. The Torah is a set of cosmic laws to which nature aligns. And the behavioral laws that result from that are exactly that. They're a result of the cosmic laws, not the other way around. So let's try and understand it. The only way I found to understand or to get some insight into this seemingly absurd law is through the Ramban on Chumash. Reuven Margolius was a big Talmud Chacham in the early part of the 20th century. He was very big in the Mizrahi movement at that time, and he was also an academic. He was a researcher. Came to Eretz Yisrael in the 1930s. So he published the Vikuach HaRamban. The Ramban put an argument for the Talmud, an argument for Yiddishkeit to the Catholic Church. And about 100 years ago, Reuven Margolius published the Vikuach HaRamban. And in the beginning of it, he gives a very beautiful biography of the Ramban. And he talks there about how serious it is when we bring secular authorities to determine matters in the Torah world, because it started all with the machlokes against the Rambam, and they wanted to ban the Rambam, and that became a major issue, and the non-Jewish courts became involved, and while they were involved looking at the Rambam, they started looking at the Talmud, and that led to anti-Semitism, which led to the burning of the Talmud in 1242 in Paris. And the burning of the Talmud wasn't just they burnt a set of Talmud. They burnt every sefer that existed. There were no libraries after that burning of the Talmud. We had to re-establish Torah after that in 1242. And it led ultimately to the Ramban's argument, his debate with the Catholic Church, which Reuven Margolius publishes. And in this biography at the beginning of the Sefer, he talks about the uniqueness of the Ramban. And he says very often we've got people who wrote works on the Talmud, who wrote works of learning. And we've got people who wrote works of philosophy. And we've got people who did both, who wrote works on the Talmud and works of philosophy. But only the Ramban, he claims, so successfully interweaves his philosophy and his Kabbalah and his Drush with his Talmud. Now, he doesn't do that in his Talmud works. When the Ramban is being Mefarish the Talmud, the Perush Ramban on the Talmud, the Chidush Ramban, doesn't have philosophy in it and doesn't have Kabbalah in it, as it should be. The learning of Gemara, the methodology has to be very precise, and you don't bring all those things into it. That would be like bringing art and literature to try and explain mathematics. You can bring maths into explaining art and literature, but you can't do it the other way around. So the Ramban's Perushim on the Gemara are pure. There's no philosophy in that. But he certainly, if you look at the Ramban's Perush on the Chumash, you've got it all. There you've got the philosophy, and you've got the Kabbalah, and you've got the Medrash, and you've got the Gemara. He brings this vast and deep and complex understanding of Talmud into his Perush on Chumash. And to understand this halacha, we have to go back to Parshas Noach and see the Ramban in Parshas Noach, and then we'll understand not only the secret of Shor HaNiskal, but we'll understand one of the secrets of the universe, as the Ramban himself puts it. And the posuk there is Va'ach et dimchem lenafshotechem et rosh miyad kol chaya edrushenu. After Hashem allows people to eat meat, which is after the flood, he says, however, you can't eat blood from the meat. You've got to get rid of the blood in the meat, and you can't murder one another. Hashem introduces various restrictions into killing. And then he adds, I will demand justice from any living being that kills a human. Asks the Ramban on the next page of the source sheet. Tameani, I'm amazed. Im hadrisha kamashma, I almost danced with joy when I saw this Ramban, because it's the only person I saw who had the problem that I struggled with, and I couldn't understand why nobody had this problem. Says the Ramban, I'm amazed. This doesn't make sense. Im hadrisha kamashma, if you take this literally, miyad hachaya kamo miyad ha'adam liyot onesh b'davar, are you going to punish animals for killing people or for killing each other? An animal operates instinctually. It doesn't have knowledge. It doesn't make choices. How can it be rewarded or punished for anything? Let's learn the Ramban carefully. This is probably then talking not about animals killing one another. That's going to be that if an animal kills a human, that animal needs to be put to death. That's gzeras melech. That's a chok. That's gzeras hakosov. It's a law of Hashem. And that's why a shor has to be put to death. If an ox gores a human, it has to be put to death. It's not to punish the owner of the ox, to have to lose his ox because of this. Because even a hefker ox, according to the Ramban here, has to be put to death. And the law is given to non-Jews as well as Jews. This isn't part of Choshen Mishpat. And therefore the way to read the Pasuk is anybody who spills human blood, whether man or animal, his blood will be claimed. He will be guilty of death, both in Beis Din if there are witnesses, and if there are no witnesses, Bidei Shamayim. I will not tolerate the killing of people by any being. Any being, whether human or animal, kills a human being is Chayav Misa, says Hashem. And now the Ramban goes into the cosmic sense of it. And he says, maybe this requirement that an animal may not kill a human, it can't be a law, because animals don't go to yeshiva, they don't know the halacha. What does it mean? Ki kain sam b'tivam, because that becomes their nature. V'sod ha'inyan, here is the Kabbalistic underlying principle. Ki be'et hayetzira natan la'adam et kol esev zorea zera ve'et kol etz asher bo pri etz lo'chla ve'natan l'chaya et kol yerek esev lo'chla ve'amar ha'katuv v'yehi chen. In the beginning of the creation, Hashem gave vegetation to humans to eat and gave animals the grass, the meadows. And then the Torah says, Vayehi chen. What does Vayehi chen mean? We just read Bereshit, Vayehi chen, and it was so. God said, and it was so. Notice says the Rambam. Ki hu tiv'am umin hagam. When the Torah says Vayehi chen, it means that became a law of nature embedded into nature itself. It wasn't just a statement, that became nature. So at that point, nature was human beings craved fruit and vegetables. Animals craved grasses. They didn't have any interest in killing one another. But now, and that was their instinct. Now that Hashem says you may do shchita, a human can eat meat, V'husam b'teva or b'minhag shiyu ba'alei ha'chaim zeh lezeh le'ochla. Hashem introduced bloodthirstiness into the Bria. For the first time after the flood, creatures craved each other to consume one another. And therefore, so it wasn't just humans. Hashem said, yeah, humans can kill animals. But by doing so, Hashem is altering the state of the universe. From a universe where there was instinct only for vegetation to a universe where the animal in the human wants to eat meat. But that animal in the human is the same animal as is in animals. So now if the animal in the human wants to eat meat, now that he's been given the heter of shchita, and it's interesting, when God says, you may shecht, again, this becomes part of nature. This is not just God saying, I'll give you the laws of shchita, I'll give you a piece of Yoredea, some extra laws to keep, and then you can eat meat. It's changing nature. When Hashem allows humans to eat meat by shchita, that's changing nature. And as a result of that, in nature, you now have a bloodthirstiness. And and therefore he had to command that other animals can be used for human consumption. And he has to introduce into nature that the animals won't retaliate and won't consume humans. So Hashem introduces a new law. A law of death sentence for an animal that consumes a human, that kills a human. so as to change the nature of the animal away from human bloodthirstiness. So yes, they may want to eat each other, and a lion may want to eat a deer, but he doesn't have a natural craving to eat a human being, because Hashem gave the isur of gam miyad kol chaya edroshenu lirmos ki lo yidrosh dam chaya miyad chaverta im kein nishar bahem litrof zu et zu. And therefore they are left craving to kill one another, but not to kill humans. And the Ramban goes in. So here we see that this din of Shor HaNiskal is a law in nature. So when Beis Din gets together to execute, this is about maintaining the correct balance of nature. This is about maintaining animal instinct. This is about maintaining the boundaries between animals and human beings in the laws of the jungle. For that, you need a Beis Din of 23. You need a Beis Din, and we know that Beis Din we know is, in the Torah is called Elokim. We use Hashem's name, and it's the name Elokim. And we know that Elokim, Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem, is in Gematria the same as Hateva. That Elokim is Hashem in his role of creating the rules of nature. So when a Beis Din gets together, it's to establish or to maintain or to change nature. When a Beis Din gets together, it actually changes. That's what it represents, God in executing the law and applying the law in a way that impacts nature. That's why you need a Beis Din for a conversion. Why do you need a Beis Din for a conversion? Because you're changing the nature of a human being from a non-Jewish person into a Jewish person. When the Beis Din paskins a halacha, when the Beis Din says it's Rosh Chodesh, it changes nature. All sorts, the tides change, women's cycles change depending on when Rosh Chodesh is. So nature is impacted by decisions of Elokim, of the judges, when they sit as Beis Din. And here, when there's been a human being, when an animal has crossed the boundary that Hashem set for them in Parashat Noach, and the animal has allowed its instinct to result in the killing of a human being, we need a Beis Din to re-establish the laws of nature. Hashor Yisakel. In this case, the shor has to be put to death so as to give effect to the law that Hashem instituted in Parashat Noach, that while animals can crave one another and are permitted to kill one another, they have no instinctual craving for human beings. Yes, sometimes they feel threatened by a human and they'll attack a human, but they don't walk around salivating for human flesh. That's not what they want. They want to kill animals, not humans. Those are the Gedorim, those are the laws that Hashem sets. And we see here how the halachot, the laws of the Torah, are not laws, are not behavioral and societal laws, but they are cosmic laws that design the way the world operates. And our behavioral laws are simply to align us to the way the universe is designed so that we can live lives that don't come into friction with the way Hashem designed the world.